we're back on. We had just voted on Resolution 2013-117, and that was approved. Okay, now we are on to discussion. Do any members have anything that they wish to discuss at this point? And we will start. We'll start with Mr. Strobel.
So I do have some comments. I appreciate that the citizens came out and voiced their concerns with the RFP, but they once again, used the TV to propound some facts, as they would call them. And I'd like to just run through a few of those things so that we just have an understanding of where the gray areas are. The first one I want to start with, because we hear it repeatedly, is their top line, headline-grabbing savings number for Mendham Township. And as they well know, there are shared services that are contributed to by the Washington Township. There are other items that may deduct from those savings, so nobody actually really knows what the savings number is yet when we keep hearing this top line, headline-grabbing number. The second thing is we heard once again that there is going to be improved education as a result of this. We've been hearing that for several years now. There's a lot of statistics that show that the school is doing quite well. I think we're up to 9th in terms of how our students are performing on SATs based on those scoring above 1550. The other thing is that we've never heard a plan advanced as to how the money's going to be used. We heard Mr. Kavanaugh stand here at our March meeting, who's now running for school board, and basically tell us that he would tell you anything about how he would use that money in order to get you to support that plan. It concerns me greatly that somebody would stand here and say that and then run for school board. There is again the statement that we spend more at Central per student, and it's $1,200. I think the number is $1.6 million. As our school board representative knows, because he goes to the school board meetings, all of that is explained by the fact that the teachers at Central are on a higher salary guide. And I was at a meeting of the school board when he raised the issue of mandating that the superintendent provide for equal funding. And the board refused to do that. The superintendent did offer two solutions or two opportunities for how he might even up that funding, one of which involved moving the senior staff to Mendham, junior staff to Central. Neither our representative or the person who works with him on the board on these issues took the superintendent up on those proposals. In my mind, it was simply a soundbite. The suggestion was again made that Washington Township has the majority of the school board. They don't. It is now a 5-4 split with the Mendhams and the Chesters having the 5. So that's not true. On the issue of the property value per share, looking at the different ranges of formulas, the reason I put that in there, and I did it, was that demographics are changing. And unless we see how those formulas pay out against the changing demographics, we don't really know how this proposal will impact Mendham Township and whether we will be better off or worse off at the end of the day based on the changing demographics. And what I mean by changing demographics is not the wealth of the communities, but the sheer number of students that will be sent to the school. And we need to understand that. We also need to understand that we will remain in a regional district when this is all said and done. We will have to work with the other 4 towns. We will have to come to some consensus on how the school is run and how it is funded. We need to have an understanding based on a third party as to how these funding formulas will work, not based on conjecture, speculation, and people throwing out numbers at a meeting when we're sitting down in a room, hopefully someday, to figure out whether we can advance an option to the state and hopefully to a vote. We should get those numbers laid out by a third party. There was a suggestion that we expanded the scope by 50% because the number of pages expanded by 50% in the RFP. I think the number of pages went up by 4. 2 of those are state-required forms. Most of the rest of it was requirements that Mr. Mountain added procedurally, which apparently the folks from CBS support. I look back and it's about a page or so, maybe a long page, of additional questions to basically get more definitive answers as opposed to leaving things to conjecture going forward. Finally, the suggestion was made, and it was about me, folks, that I opposed the study. Yes, there was a time in March, having just come from a school board meeting, when I opposed the study. That was the only time I opposed the study, and I'll plead guilty. I made a mistake. I confused my feelings about how the effort to change the funding formula is being conducted with the need to actually get down and figure out whether the funding formula should be changed. Let me elaborate. We continue to have facts or statements made that are not fully based in facts. We have a school board member who spends his time telling us, in an effort to get us to vote for the dissolution of the school, that the school is failing. In the meantime, he sits on the school board charged with the responsibility of making sure the school succeeds. I left a meeting of the school board, frankly, quite upset at the fact that our school board member apparently has a very significant conflict of interest as he proceeds with his mission of dissolving the schools, one which I may ultimately support. But I don't believe that he can continue to sit on the school board with that conflict of interest and try to convince people that the school is failing while at the same time having the responsibility of improving the school. So, when I left that meeting, I resolved that I was going to try to put a stop to this nonsense, and I frankly did it in the wrong way. I advocated against a study for a short period in March. That is against a backdrop of about 2 years of supporting a study and telling people that the only way this could be done was through a dissolution of the schools. And that includes last summer, when I supported going forward with an RFP at that time. And yes, it would have included a mega district. But CBS's own legal expert advised this committee that that study could have gone forward with that mega district in it and done no harm, and we would never have voted or had a chance to adopt that. We could have been a year ahead on this. So to suggest, and really that was driven by CBS. They wanted to vote Washington Township off the island prematurely. They did it, and they caused a year delay. And now they've spent the last 6 months blaming other people for causing delays. I think, folks, we just need to keep an eye on what the real facts are. I'm happy to advance a study. I'm happy to make sure all the facts are available. I'm not happy with the funding formula myself, but I think we need to understand all the ramifications. Thank you.
Boy, comprehensive. Mary Beth.
Not nearly as long-winded. But the members of the who came up to speak tonight mentioned several times a steering committee and their desire to partake in that. And I think, Mr. Mills, you might be able to help with this. The borough pretty much owns the RFP, and they've pretty much taken ownership of the project with us and the Chesters giving our input. But I think we agreed that they're basically the owners of the project. So I think that it would be more beneficial to them to address the borough, because we really can't tell the borough who to have on their committee. As far as I know, they haven't gone to a meeting like they come to our meetings with the TV. I think to help them along with their cause.
I share your opinion. Mary Beth. I think that the concern from the citizens might be that the borough would be afraid that the township would look differently at its funding commitment for the RFP if all of our suggestions weren't adopted. But I don't think we sent it across as an ultimatum. We simply said, these are our suggestions. The borough adopted them, and they are the architects of the RFP. You're right.
So, and to that point, with our suggestions that we presented to them, I think they need to go to the borough to ask them to remove that if they see the need for that.
Agreed.
But somewhat to Rob's point, I think the more information the residents have of all the towns, the better they will be able to make an informed decision with all the formulations intact, I think. And the formulations won't include Mendham, Long Valley. It'll just be the 4 towns. It won't be the 5. So
it's a request for a proposal. It's not something that is cast in stone.
That was my point. Let the residents take the information and make their decision. I think they're smart enough to make the decision. We need to give them the information. And so they need to speak to the borough. They need to speak to them about the steering committee if they want to be part of it. and the borough owns the RFP and the project, and so those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, Mary Beth and Rob, thank you very much. I was just alluding to that myself. Is in the business world, an RFP is a request for a proposal. We're not asking for a firm, hard contract. We're asking to gather information on a scope and an objective to a certain project, and you try to get as much data as possible in a request for proposal to be able to determine the best solution, or have the public provided with data, real data from a third party, to say, here's what that is. And from there, we can then make an informed decision. I think we're skipping a couple steps here by saying the RFP has to be this way. Thus, this is the conclusion to the RFP. Then why have an RFP? Why not just adopt a resolution to say this is what we like to do? So that's where I'm a little confused. A request for a proposal is what it is. It's not saying you're signing up for anything. It's just gathering the information from a third party based on a scope and an objective. So I'm confused at what the definition of some people have of an RFP versus my personal perception of what an RFP means.
You could Google that.
Wiki Googles or whatever that is. So I guess we can discuss the definition of an RFP if we like, but I think we're past that point. That's it.
Sam?
The borough has taken a leadership role, and I think that they need to carry the ball forward. There were some interesting suggestions made tonight by a gentleman I had not seen before, and I think it would do him great service to everyone to go to the borough and make those suggestions about assumptions and a few other things. Very interesting. I agree with your comments by and large on most of the things you said, and you said it all already.
All right. I will take my prerogative.
I do have one.
Yes, Rob.
Further comment on when we're talking about facts that need to be checked, and it's the suggestion that the regional school board will have anything to do with changing the funding formula. All the regional school board can do is vote a referendum to actually change the funding formula, which most of the proponents of that effort, including the people that were in this room tonight, have already admitted will never pass because it requires Washington Township to concur in the change to the funding formula, something they will never do. The only way to effect the change that they want is to dissolve the school and reform with a changed funding formula. And that effort has nothing to do with the school board. They have no role to play in that. And the fact that people continue to confuse the two is of great concern to me, because we have a number of people, including Mr. Kavanaugh, who is now going to run for school board, who has that role confused, and all they're going to do is add rancor to a board that needs to get down to the job of advising and working with our superintendent to deliver what should be one of the best high schools in the state. And in fact, Mr. Pendergrass shared at the last school board meeting the fact that Mendham High School is close to being the first non-academy, non-charter high school in the state to receive the reward designation, about which we in Mendham Township are so proud that our middle school has, based on the HESPA scores that they've received. So he deserves the board's support. He doesn't need a rancorous board trying to, ram through something that cannot pass. The effort to dissolve and change the funding formula should take place wholly outside of the school board. The school board needs to work to support the superintendent, deliver the best and most efficient education that can be delivered.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Okay. From my perspective, my concern, first of all, is that we have better tax equity, but my other concern is that we maintain a good, strong school system, because last time I checked, that's one of the real elements that people look at when they decide whether they want to live in a community. So I think that those concerns need to be balanced, and whatever approach and whatever solutions we undertake have to look at both of those issues. Ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that we're dealing with several other communities. This is not simply a decision that Mendham gets to make on its own. Mendham Township gets to make on its own. It's not even a decision that Mendham Borough and Mendham Township get to make on their own together. This requires participation of other parties. So I think there is a need to work with them rather than necessarily say, hey, this is good for us, and this is the way it's going to be. Obviously, notwithstanding what was discussed here tonight, the outcome of this process has to be something that's going to improve Mendham Township's tax situation. If it doesn't, I don't see that it would obtain majority support, even in Mendham Township, much less in other places. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm sure that the product that's going to come out is probably going to be something that is going to improve our situation, and that will enable us to get support, but we also have to get something that's going to be able to get support in several other communities at the same time. I don't see how you get around having some kind of compromise in that process. I don't think it's a mistake to be talking about it. It's lovely to talk about a formula that was adopted in 1958. Frankly, it probably never should have been changed, but it was changed. The question is, how are we going to get it amended and improved at this point? And we may not get 100% of what we want, but I would like it to see us make some sort of progress. And I think sometimes being absolutist means that you don't make the progress. You can be absolutely right and lose the game entirely. I've heard some suggestions, as Sam has said. I thought those were interesting suggestions regarding possible assumptions. I don't see any reason why those could not be put forward directly to the owners of the RFP, which is to say the borough. And if they make sense, and if they're reasonable, and if they improve the process, I don't know why the borough wouldn't want to consider it. My experience is that RFPs are works in progress. They're always works in progress. That said, we still have to get several communities on the same page once it comes to being able to support this document. So I don't think we can afford to continue to change it when we want to. This is a complicated process. I think we have to work with our neighbor communities. I stress that because where they haven't been able to get along, the process has gone nowhere, despite good efforts by a lot of people. I think, and by the way, I mean, someone belittled the progress in saying there was no real progress. Well, there is progress. For the first time, you have Mendham Borough and Mendham Township on the same page, and at least a prospect of one other community coming on the same page as well. That, to me, represents progress. And I think we need to give it a chance, and I think we need to support it. I understand the concerns. I'm glad to have public input. I'm glad that people feel passionate about this, but people feel passionate about a lot of things. It's important that we make deliberate decisions at the end of the day that the five of us judge are in the best interest of the people of Mendham Township as a whole. And I think that's what we're trying to do. I'm comfortable with the decision that we reached previously. We have had no request from the borough or any member of the borough for us to change our suggestions for the RFP, nor did they have an obligation to adopt each and every one that we suggested, but they did. I think we've made great progress. I think we ought to continue on that basis, and I personally don't think that going back to square one at this point is the right thing to do. That said, I think I've beaten that to death. Let's see what else we have on the agenda for this evening.